So here I'm revisiting the sine curve, and I'm looking at the characteristics of the curve: amplitude, frequency, phase shift. I have the general equation for the sine curve here, and then you can see how these parameters are related to these different characteristics. So A gives you the amplitude, which is just how high the graph is. C gives you the phase shift, which is how far left or right you move the curve. And B is related to the period and the frequency, which I think are a little bit harder to understand for the students. And then I have the actual equation. But you can adjust the sliders down here to change the equation, and of course change these characteristics, and just see how things go. So why don't we look at amplitude first. So if we change A, we're directly changing the amplitude. So if I move, so it looks like we've moved the amplitude to 6, yes, and that means that the parameter is exactly the same. Okay, so that's easy to understand. And the phase shift as well. So let's go down here and change this parameter C, and that gives you exactly what the phase shift is. You can see that this has been moved over 3 units. So there's the phase shift. So those two are pretty easy to understand. The harder to understand is the period and the frequency. So let's put the phase shift back to 0. And let's take a look at this here. So if I move B, I'm going to change both the frequency and the period. So this, if I move it up, it squeezes it in there. All right. And I have colored blue the period. Okay. And so if you squeeze the graph in, the period is going to be smaller. So as we start out, when B is 1, it takes a little over, you have to go a little past 6 to get in 1 cycle. So that means the period is a little bit more than 6. Actually, it's 2 pi, right, which is what you would expect if you're just looking at plain old sine of x. If you squeeze it in, the period is going to be smaller because you're going to achieve a cycle more quickly. So here it looks like the period is more than 1, like maybe about 1.5. So a little bit more than 1.5 there. So that's what the period is. It's how far along the x-axis you have to go to get in 1 cycle. And then finally the frequency. If I squeeze this in more, you'll see what I meant to indicate the frequency peeking out here in the orange. The frequency is how many cycles you get in an interval of length 1. So here, I'll start. So here's 1, right? And then a little bit more. So that means the frequency for this curve is just a little bit more than 1. So here it is, 1.27. Squeeze it in a little bit more here. All right, so there's 1. Okay, and then there's another one, there's 2. So it looks like it's 2 and then a little bit more, 2.71. So anyway, that's the definition of frequency, and you can see what it is. If you want to hide the blue line so that you can just see what indicates the frequency, you can do that as well. So anyway, I think this you can adjust these all together, see what the equation is, see what the characteristics are. I hope this is helpful because I do think this can be a little bit bewildering to students when they first see it.